On December the 8th, 2020, 91-year-old Margaret Keenan became the first person in the world to receive a Covid vaccine right here in the UK. Just over 9 months later, more than 75% of adults have been double jabbed and nearly 90% have had at least one dose. To date, the vaccine programme has helped prevent more than 23 million cases, 84,000 deaths and 66,000 hospitalisations. So, is it time to start vaccinating all children? I'm Lizzie Parry, Head of Health at The Sun, and today I want to examine a question that's dividing opinion in the UK and around the world. Should we vaccinate children against coronavirus? Of course, some children over the age of 12 are already being vaccinated in the UK. Until now, the rollout to under 18s has been limited to kids with underlying health conditions or those living with vulnerable relatives. It includes children with severe neurodisabilities, Down syndrome, those who are immunosuppressed, and youngsters with severe learning disabilities. However, earlier this month, the JCVI, that's the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, recommended that all 16 and 17-year-olds should be offered a first dose of the Pfizer jab. Second doses will come, but the JCVI said it wants to wait for more evidence to determine the right interval, be it 8 or 12 weeks, and the jab's effectiveness and safety in this group. So far, tens of thousands of people in the age group have already had their jab. Meanwhile, last week, officials met in Whitehall to discuss extending the rollout to healthy children over the age of 12, giving jabs at school as part of the childhood vaccination programme. In the UK, we're being more cautious than many other countries around the world. In the US, all 12 to 15-year-olds are being vaccinated against coronavirus. China has approved the use of their Sinovac jab in kids aged 3 to 17, and children won't be able to return to school unless they and their parents have been vaccinated. France, Italy and the Netherlands are offering vaccination to all children over the age of 12. But in contrast, Sweden is taking things slowly, like the UK, with vaccination open to everyone over the age of 16, with just vulnerable younger children getting jabs. And in Germany, the official advice from the government is that vaccines should only be recommended for those aged 18 and over, with some local authorities choosing to vaccinate over 12s. The arguments for and against vaccinating children centre on balancing the risks versus the benefits. Does the possibility of some children experiencing very rare side effects outweigh the risk of catching COVID itself? Then there's the risk of kids spreading coronavirus to older people. Does that justify vaccinating them against a disease that they're largely unaffected by? And what about the impact of young people having to miss more time at school if they or a classmate test positive? They're tough questions, made even harder to answer by the constantly evolving situation, with cases fluctuating amid the real threat of new variants emerging. So what are the main benefits of vaccinating children?
There are two main reasons for vaccinating younger people. The first is that, unfortunately, children are by no means exempt from long COVID. The study which has just come out suggests that about 1 in 50 young people get long COVID, and that if they do get it, then they can be affected for many weeks, indeed many, many months. So just because they're not going to end up in hospital does not necessarily mean that they won't have long-term effects from having the virus. We know that having the vaccine greatly reduces the chance of you developing the illness. It doesn't completely get rid of it. You can still catch it. We think probably about 60% lower chance of catching COVID if you've been vaccinated. Therefore, we would expect that you can reduce the chance of getting long COVID with children and young people in the same way as you have with adults by up to 60%. The other thing we need to bear in mind is so-called community immunity, sometimes called herd immunity. Now, probably because people can still get the virus even if they've been vaccinated, we're never going to get to the stage of having herd immunity where it just stops circulating completely because there aren't enough people who are vulnerable to getting the infection. However, the more people who are vaccinated, the lower the chance of having big flare-ups and big surges during the winter particularly.
One silver lining that emerged fairly early on in the pandemic is that children don't seem to suffer the severe consequences of COVID infection. A University College London study found that in the UK there is a 1 in 50,000 chance of a child ending up in ICU with COVID. And there's just a 2 in a million chance of a child dying as a result of infection. But that doesn't mean there's no risk. The latest decision to extend the vaccine programme to 16 and 17-year-olds comes amid reports of a rise in the number of youngsters in ICU with severe COVID. But as with any medication, the COVID jab does come with the risk of some very rare side effects.
The vast majority of the side effects that people get after the vaccine, regardless of their age, are a sore arm, maybe feeling a little bit achy, a little bit of fever, which usually settles in 1 to 2 days. There have been some very rare side effects, which we've only identified because we've given so many people the vaccine. And let's not forget that in many other countries, 12-year-olds and upwards are already being vaccinated. So lots of children have had the vaccine. One of them is inflammation of the heart muscle, so-called myocarditis. And to put this into perspective, somewhere between 1 in maybe 25,000 men and boys aged 12 to 29 and 1 in 250,000 females aged 12 to 29 will end up with this inflammation of the heart muscle. There's also been, of course, a concern about this very, very rare clot on the brain, so-called CVT. Now, that doesn't seem to be more common in younger people, and the people where we have seen it, and again, it's been very rare even in them, but the people who've tended to get it after vaccination have been the sort of people who would tend to get this same clot, whether even if they hadn't been vaccinated.
Of course, no one is suggesting that COVID vaccines for children should be mandatory. So do young people actually want to get vaccinated? According to a recent YouGov survey, the answer is yes. It found that hesitancy in 16 and 17-year-olds has decreased from 14% to 11%. It's hoped as many as possible will take up the offer before schools go back. As always, if you want more information, visit the NHS website or speak to your GP.